Hello and welcome to the IdeaCast interview series, episode number 160. My guest in this episode is Dr. Julianna Walsh, and I found Dr. Walsh through an article in the Florida Institute of Technology's recent newsletter that they had published, and she was featured in there. And I thought, after having read the article, that it would be really neat to have her on for a conversation. So I reached out, and she kindly agreed to join me for a conversation. And in this conversation, the conversation tends to revolve around a recent app launch that she was a conspirator of and had developed. And I say conspirator because her logo is a lemur, and a group of lemurs is called a conspiracy. So I'd say she was a grand conspirator in this development. And it's based on personal experience, but it's also based on research. And the app is centered around helping career women navigate workspace, especially as they emerge into workspace. It's also, the app is friendly to gender fluid people as well. And so I just feel good about bringing what little awareness I can to the app through my show and supporting women as they emerge into the workplace and develop themselves career-wise. So I was grateful to Julianna for appearing here and having a conversation with me. I hope you enjoy the conversation, and I appreciate you being here. And I'd like to welcome Dr. Julianna Walsh to the IdeaCast interview series. Julianna and I had a pre-meet and we chatted, and I'm looking forward to this conversation. I think it'll lend itself to the community as being helpful and future forward thinking and all of that. So Julianna, welcome. Glad to have you.
Thank you. Thanks so much. I'm really excited for this conversation.
As am I. And also to the audience, welcome to you all. And I'll give a little tiny provenance story to how I came across Dr. Walsh, and that was that you are an alum of Florida Tech, and I live close to Florida Tech, not too far away. And for years, I've been dabbling in their horticulture and their botany by contributing specimens to the botanical garden up there. So I kind of keep my finger on the pulse of all things Florida Techy. And back in the 90s, they were, this is a tangent, and you knew I was going to, industrial music was big on the Florida Tech campus in the early 90s. So I would tune into their public radio station and listen to all the new industrial noise that was coming out, and the EBM or EDM or whatever it's called now. So anyway, so I do have an affinity to Florida Tech, so I'll hush. Let's get to know you a little bit. I opened up the FIT box a little bit, so maybe we can find out about your degree that you got a few years ago.
Sure. Yeah, so I did. I went to Florida Tech for grad school. I went there for my master's and stayed and got my PhD as well in industrial organizational psychology. So some people might have heard of it before, but I know everybody hasn't. It's basically like, and this is the description I love, is from Adam Grant, who's an organizational psychologist. And he basically say it's, we make work not suck. So there's a lot of different angles you can take with that. And organizational psychologists go on to do a lot of different things. But helping organizations hire talent, keep them engaged, employee well-being, leadership development, things like culture and performance management, all sorts, entire span of, people working together in an organization and how to optimize that. But I like the softer side personally, which is, I think, going to become quite apparent in this conversation.
Right. And even to say softer, it is yet nonetheless a powerful engine, a virtual engine of innovation and progress and development. So yeah, it should never be considered. I think I understand soft, but I would say that there is a deep power to that softness.
There's a lot, obviously I think so. There's a lot of different perceptions around it, because as a science, you think of like hard sciences and soft sciences, and this is in the realm of psychology. It is a very statistical field, and it's very research heavy, but I focused on generally leadership, but I also focused on emotions in the workplace, and I focused on gender and leadership in my research. so that was what got me quite excited and focusing on, how female leaders were perceived as opposed to male leaders when they were doing, or they were kind of showing up in a way that was more stereotypically feminine. If you think of a stereotype of, maybe being empathetic or showing more compassion or being a little bit softer as a leader, this saying soft, I think soft is power as well. So it's, these kind of stereotypical attributes and how that was perceived from a female leader versus a male leader. And I could talk about that for ages, so I don't want to go too deep down a research rabbit hole too quickly.
But we can come back, we'll pin that a little bit and we can pull it out occasionally, because in having researched where you are right now and some of the interviews that you've done, I was left with an impression that there is a need for awareness, was shining a light on this, like the double bind that you speak to, and some of the problems that we see, the contradictions, the performative contradictions that show up in business culture or leadership culture. So yeah, we'll kind of pin that for a moment, and we'll bring it out when it's necessary. And when you speak to like soft power versus sort of more of a authoritarian kind of top down, crack the whip kind of power. I have very little education, but I was taking a business math or statistical business math when I was a teenager out of high school in one of the local community colleges, and they hit me with something that I thought was really neat. And it's say whether it was the X theory of management versus Y theory of management, and you don't hear about it very often. And I guess it's in the background, but so X is leadership through coercion and discipline and all these kind of things, whereas Y is more just leadership by sort of rewarding innovation and so carrots and sticks, or however you want to say that. So that comes to mind a little bit when we think about the stereotypes or the roles that are inhabited by persons who feel the need to have that more, we'll say masculine role of X theory or theory X, that is, coercion, and versus, as you were saying, like more of a softer leadership that recognizes talent and innovation and discipline and all these things that we want to see in a productive work environment. And perhaps there needs to be a tension there, right? A tonos that we can have those moments of X and then moments of Y. So I'll hand that back to you if that has any kind of traction.
Yeah, no, I mean, it does probably too much traction. So there's a difference there in thinking whether employees have this intrinsic motivation to do work and therefore don't need to be coerced, as you say, and, pushed and micromanaged and all this, a little bit more of a hard hand in managing employees versus, that they don't have that intrinsic and they need to be pushed. They need that extrinsic motivation. They need a reason to work. So yeah, the softer side is a little bit thinking that, people actually want to contribute in the world and they've got potential. They want meaningful lives. They, want to grow and contribute. This actually reminds me, I saw Jacinda Ardern, the former Prime Minister of New Zealand, maybe 10 days ago, not very long ago, at the Royal Albert Hall. She gave a talk. She's just had a book. I think the book just came out, and I want to say it's called a different type of power, something, or a different kind of power, something very much like that. And this is exactly what she goes into, is more of a stereotypically feminine leadership approach, one leading with kindness, leading with compassion, and, how far that can go, as opposed to, a common assumption that we need to lead in a very decisive, very assertive type of way. So it's a very interesting conversation, and one that tends to line up with gender dynamics quite often. Again, how my research, that's the path I went down with it. And something that kind of ended up seeing in the real world. And, I started working in consulting, and because I'd focused on leadership, I was working in leadership assessment and development. Really interesting work in building these programs and assessing leaders and coaching leaders and things like this. There is a difference, and it's not always taken into account in organizations. I definitely knew about it from my research that not everybody is seen the same. They're not judged or evaluated the same way. whether intentionally or whether it be unconscious. And so when that isn't taken into account in workplaces, that's where we get into this, the double bind that you mentioned earlier, and these tricky dynamics and nuances that you need to navigate based on how people expect you to behave, and versus who you are authentically. And there's a lot there. It's quite a complex thing. It's not a kind of binary this or that. It's not a simple contradiction. So yes, very complex. And that's where I ended up kind of focusing my, there's something wrong here. There's a gap. And I was feeling it myself personally, very personal mission that I'm on. So, yeah, that's where I headed with where I am now.
Right. And again, if I did my research correctly, it seems like when you went from academia into the work environment, that you were confronted by this, and also put in a space, I think, where I think you mentioned imposter syndrome at one point, where you're kind of questioning yourself, and it is these power dynamics that are forces or kinetic forces that it's there, and but maybe I'm going to intuit that as someone whose background was in organizational industrial psychology, that lights would come on perhaps, but nonetheless you're still sort of feeling that kinetic energy, and that must have been interesting, right, from where you're coming from, to experience it and take it in as a living, breathing human being who has affective states, but also somebody who's disciplined and knows, yeah. So what was that like? Just like moving through that crucible.
Yeah, it's I wish the light had gone on a lot sooner.
Okay.
Because the shocking thing about these dynamics, the bias in the work, however you want to think of it, differences, the impact can be very subtle and very sneaky, and very internalized. So you don't, my research and the data I was familiar with focused on leaders, women who were already leaders, and how they were perceived by others, and what that led to. And, when you're a researcher, there's a bit of distance between yourself and what you're studying. But I think it took so long for the light bulb to come on because it was something I'd internalized a lot earlier in my life. And I think we're in this odd phase where, bias and discrimination, these things aren't so obvious anymore. Sometimes they definitely are, for sure. But when you're growing up and everybody's telling you, girls can do what boys can do, and gender bias isn't an issue anymore in the workplace because it's not, as obvious as it was at a certain time. But when you're kind of fed all this stuff and you're told, you just need to lean in, you just need to speak up, you just need to be more confident. When it doesn't work, because it still doesn't work. We do face a double bind. We still, this bias is still so widely prevalent. Then you start to blame yourself. But even from a young age, you're not taking as many risks as a young girl. You're taught to kind of be quiet and perfect and not, cause a fuss and all these little things, where boys will be boys and they're out playing in the mud and they're making a mess and they're taking up space and these things. And, obviously the playground is, it is far from the playground to the office, but in the corporate world, but that sticks with you. And you have these tiny moments where you see who's rewarded. You have these tiny little experiences that just kind of add up, and maybe your risks and your, when you assert yourself and when you are decisive, maybe it's not received as well as often. So maybe you start to tone that down. So it's a very internal journey, and it's a very convincing one. So it did take a long time for me to realize what was happening and how that fit in with my own imposter syndrome, my self-doubt, my lack of confidence, until several years into my career, until I was like, hold on. I had to combat a lot of things and I feel like go the extra mile to make this personal transformation and growth for myself to build confidence. And then when it happened, I was always a high achiever, perfectionist, went above and beyond with everything that I did, was praised constantly. Like, a lot of young women are going through university and things like that. You're really good at getting high grades, and then you get into the workplace and that same work isn't rewarded, and managers end up kind of wanting to keep you where you are because you do a really great job and you're not pushing too much for more than that. The main feedback I was getting was that I needed to be more confident. So I did that work. And then the same manager who had told me I needed to be more confident then told me I was too difficult to manage. For the same, I then started to speak up. I started to assert my point of view. I was more confident. There is a very real backlash when you do these things.
Okay.
And that's what's not talked about. That's the advice we don't get growing up. How do you navigate that? How do you, work for your visibility? How do you promote your work? That type of, those behaviors that aren't received as well from women. How do you navigate that in the workplace?
This is forming a little thought bubble over my head, because we are going to lead into what you're doing presently. And it seems like that's where, sort of the singularity for you, or the lipid, I got the idea of the lipid pool, like the theory of how life started on this planet, like warm lipid pools with amino acids, blah, blah, blah. It's like, this is the crucible, or the genesis point, And so I'm intuiting that through this, through your felt experience, your lived experience, that this is maybe where the light came on, for what you're doing presently. And we can be hushy about that for a second and develop, this broader idea, this broader conversation about young women, young professional women. There may be a resource ecology out there, but that getting that in their hands and getting that available. So had you had something in that formative or that transitional stage into your professional career. What would the trajectory have looked like from that? Yeah. So maybe this is the segue to talk about
it's yeah, I mean, it's something
if
that
you want.
Yeah, absolutely. It's something that haunts me sometimes.
Okay.
It hurts to think about how much I'd held myself back and how much I was held back early on in my career because I avoided opportunities. I struggled to kind of own my wins and promote them. I watched as more senior men took credit for my ideas, and I wasn't going to say anything about it, but I was super happy to take blame for things that other people did. That happened several times. Struggled to speak up in meetings. And just it's not so much, so these behaviors are obviously detrimental. You can imagine what these things were doing for my promotability and my visibility and my future in an organization. But it's what's happening mentally day in and day out when you're probably beating yourself up for not getting your idea across well, or not negotiating for the salary that you wanted, and these types of things, and blaming yourself, and thinking you just need to speak up. It's on you. Why am I like this? Get over it. And you're reading your books on confidence or listening to the podcast and whatever it is, and it doesn't work as much as you want it to. But there's like this, I wish there was this intervention that I'd had early on, just before university or during university, start of my career, that kind of, helped me see what I know now, which is how to believe in yourself, how to show up, how to understand that it's not necessarily your fault, that often self-doubt is a rational reaction to bias systems around you. And it's a lot more complex than you just not having confidence and that's your fault, fix it.
Yeah. Which may well be the masculine, and I'll use the word masculine rather than men or man's, it's sort of the masculine expression. I bring this up in other conversations, and it's just because it had such a profound impact on me. There was a woman who was involved in a Buddhist mindfulness and sort of human well-being
aspirational well-being. And they hit upon something that I thought is very profound, and it might speak to this as well, is that she was very frank about the idea. She goes, a lot of the self-improvement, a lot of the pull yourself up kind of stuff in mindfulness and maybe a little spirituality is oriented towards men or a male or a masculine minded thing. So in other words, she's saying that like aggressive, extrovertive, alpha type males, bring yourself down and find that chi and that balance and the yada yada yada. And she's like, that's BS for women, because we're already pretty chill. We're not these, like aggressive conqueror male types. We're over here, and we need to go elevate up. It hit me like a truckload of bricks, because I was like, yes, because it's not all one size fits all. And you were talking about like the improvement books or the how-tos that they may be writing from that perspective, and there's no judgment in that at all. It's just if masculine people or men are again assertive, extrovertive, all these characteristics, that it just makes sense that there is a paradigm or a set of virtual machinery or tools that can help people who are not over here. They're over here. So anyway, but yeah, that's what came to me when you were talking about that. It's like,
yeah, and
said.
To kind of build on that, because yes, there's a lot of difference between your average woman, perhaps, and your average, thinking about masculine stereotypes and these behaviors and things like that. But as individuals, we are so different that, and I talk about how LeadHerself, and I will be talking about this, how it's for women, also for trans women, non-binaries. But I think more about anybody who's ever kind of felt like they weren't enough. Everybody, no matter how you show up in the world, what identities you're representing, has some sort of, this layer of expectation for how you should be showing up in the world. And that is shaped by such complex factors as you go throughout your life, and the context that you're in and what you want to achieve and all this stuff. So it's more about what people expect from you, making a judgment on what you look like, which compounds with, we're talking mainly about gender, but it compounds with this intersectionality of identities when you're representing multiple identities. And something I have worked really hard at is figuring out how that differs, how the nuances between whether it's age and race or ethnicity or ability or sexual identity or neurodiversity, whatever is happening for you, kind of what's expected, how you're treated, and then what can help you from there. So it's a very complex issue, which is why a lot of the support for women tends to be, you brought up one size fits all. So, then it's two sizes fits the two groups we need to talk about. And then how do we go from there? Because it's, you can't, all women aren't the same. So you can't just build, okay, here's this course for women, and here are the problems that women have. Although there are a lot of commonalities, a lot of young men are also having self-doubt and all these other things that are impacting how they show up in the world. But whatever the support is, it needs to be very dynamic and very personalized, because we all have different struggles. We all have different bias or expectations that we're up against, and different ways that we want to, address that, or different things that we want to do, and different personality attributes to show. So very complicated. I just wanted, intersectionality is a massive point for me. So I wanted to make sure that got airtime, because it is huge, and it changes the game.
Yeah. And it's complexification. Yeah. We can't just, like you said, we can't pigeonhole a binary system, or pigeonhole folks into a binary system. And I always like, again, back to TONOS, or this spectrum, or this perhaps a scale, but just, vector points along a line that we can, and it can be a complex line too. It can be that, really complicated Cartesian graph thing, so we have this 4-dimensional space that we can all, have that affinity, so like attractors, we can find ourselves attracted in and be in that space that resonates with us. And I think the point that the mindfulness, I've tried to find her name, and I'm so sorry that I haven't been able to find it, but this person that said that speaks again. And then I love what you're saying, that it's just even so more, the lens is out, the aperture is much further out than it has been. So you go back to the 1970s or 80s, and again, books for development and the approach to personal development and resilience and all these other things, it was very limited. And we live in a time where people thankfully have the affordances to, they're working on getting those affordances to be themselves in a way that, may reflect who they really are. And, so that support system has to kind of keep up with that, I guess, and make sure that we're tuning into everyone's, again, I like complexity. So it's something that, you can be comfortable with, because it can be scary, right? Learning to understand how complex we are with these mental systems that we are, these minds that we are. And anyway, let's bring out the lemur. Let's go into conspiracy territory for a moment, if we will. And the audience will get this in a moment, but when you told me in our pre-meet about conspiracy, I told my wife the other day, I said, you know what, lemur. So I had to go look up, and they, a conspiracy, I'll hand it to you, but I found something today that I thought was interesting. But I'll let you open up what you're doing with LeadHerself and your avatar that you use in that, if that's the right way to say it.
Yeah, avatar works. So basically, where I've gotten to, and I had a little bit of squiggly career that informed how I've ended up as a tech founder. I did end up working in tech for a couple of years as well.
Okay.
And realized that what I wanted to do, and this whole, based on my personal experience, what I knew with the research and conversations and seeing it everywhere, it wasn't just me. And I spent so long struggling with this. And what I wanted to do was help women who might be experiencing similar things. So what I did was that I built an app. It's called LeadHerself. It helps women, non-binary individuals, trans women. It helps you gain self-awareness, but also this awareness of what you're up against in the world around you. And it's very personalized learning journeys that help you build skills. So it's not just about confidence. There's, how do you advocate for yourself? How do you build resilience in whatever context, whatever you're working through? There's gaining focus and gaining clarity in your career. So, time management, a career vision, determination to achieve what you want to. And then there's also this more externally focused, how do you build influence? How do you negotiate? How do you network with people? And, how do you bring that into your communication style? So it's a very personalized, very adaptable, bite-sized steps that you can take, practices you can put into the real world, resources that are recommended based on exactly what you've got going on. And all of this with an acknowledgement that we are all very different. So the problems you're experiencing might not be the same as the next person that's using the app. So it is not like a video course that you're just being told these are the things you need to be doing. So you shape your own learning, you shape your own journey through it. So that's what I've done. And we just officially launched last week. So yes.
Congratulations.
Very, very exciting time. Thank you. The idea started about 2.5 years ago. And you mentioned the lemur, which is one of my favorite parts of this. And people are always asking me, like, why is the logo a cat? It's not a cat.
It's a lemur.
Maybe we need to update the logo at some point. I don't know. I like it. So the lemur thing is that when I was first couple of months after I had this idea, I really wanted like an animal or like some sort of character to kind of represent the brand. And I found out that lemurs tend to be female dominant species. Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
And they actually work together in groups, and the groups are called conspiracies, and they work together to outwit their challengers, their predators, whatever they're up against. So I loved the idea of thinking about this, the lead herself community as a group of women working together to outwit this world of work that wasn't built for us. Because that's very much, that's the tone, that's the voice that's in it already. And that was exactly, how I wanted it to feel when
Mm-hmm.
people were going through it. And, you aren't alone. That's the main message in it, because I felt alone through it. And when we talk about, if you have resources that you don't see yourself in, whether it's a book or whatever that is, and you don't feel heard, you don't feel seen, you don't feel valued, and you're kind of left wondering, it can lead to self-doubt, and it can lead, I don't want people to feel alone. I want them to feel seen, whatever their experience is, even if it doesn't fit with, I lack confidence as a woman. That's, a very big thing. It's something I talk about a lot, but that's not always the story.
Yeah. And what I love about using lemurs is that in primates, and I include us humans in the primate branch of big things, megafauna, is that matriarchy is rare. Barbary macaques are a matriarchal society, unlike some of their other macaque relatives, but that lemurs are a matriarchal society in a again, an ecosystem or a branch of living systems that doesn't always play out, and humans are like that in our social organizing, and there are matriarchal societies, but they're rare. And which I have a question about that, and I'll bring it in later. I don't want to keep bouncing around too much. But did I ever tell you, when we had the pre-meet, did I tell you the Robert Sapolsky story about baboons? Did I tell you that one? There were two troops of baboons.
I think so. Yes.
Okay, I'll skip it. Yeah. But if you know that to me is like a transition story. If anybody has a question about it, I'll give you the lecture, Stanford lecture that Sapolsky did, and you can find out about the baboons, because I won't belabor it if we talked about it. But anyway, the choice of lemur I think is very appropriate, because it's iterative. It's like within primates, very rarely do we see matriarchal society, and within humanity, we have matriarchal society, and we have fusion societies too, where there's maybe less patriarchal dominance, but that that there's still not a full on matriarchal society. So you have the app, you have LeadHerself, and I want to acknowledge something to you, that I appreciate that it is an app that is for sale, and it's not a subscription app. We are entering into a tenant economy, and I don't like that at all. And I think the fact that you will have a one-off point of sale, maybe there's upgrades and updates down the road, but you're not renting this to people. I appreciate that. I wanted to acknowledge.
So I mean, it came out of such a personal pain point for me, this entire idea, and the growth I want people to experience for it. So the main idea is actually the social impact behind it. There is, yes, some things are paid in the app. I do need to keep paying developers. I need to keep this business going. But basically there's a 2-week free trial, which is, you can get quite a lot done in 2 weeks. And the self-confidence journey stays free forever. There's no paywall behind that. I mean, I can't imagine making a woman pay for resources for growing confidence. That's what I think is wrong with the world. So it's democratizing access to these things. Journeys beyond that, you do a one-off payment for the journey. And there is, when you go into the payment process, you can see that there's a pay what you can option as well. No questions asked, because again, access to resources are part of the problem that I'm trying to fix. So I, again, don't want to be part of that issue. So there's a lot you can do in the app that's just totally free. And then the journeys themselves are pretty low cost. So yes, it's a paid app.
Which I think you are fully entitled to recompense. To me, if it was $9 a month or something like that, that to me is exploitive. But that you have to recoup, and that you have to continue to develop and pay, is completely understandable. So and
part of
that
it,
you make it accessible as well is a good balance, I think.
I think so. The subscription, there's definitely a subscription fatigue building. I feel like
Yeah.
around the world, people are just realizing how many things they've got going on, just little costs each month that certainly add up. But in a way, my decision to not have it be subscription based was kind of selfish, because then I didn't want the pressure to have more content constantly going out and, make
Oh,
sure the
yeah.
value was there month on month and month on month endlessly for somebody to be paying for. I would much rather put it in a controlled way where most of the stuff is free and you just pay for a journey. I can build a journey. I'm going to keep adding more journeys to it,
Mm.
but then I can do it on my own timeline. So part of what I'm doing here is just selfish in the sense that I don't want to work that way.
Yeah. Hey, good for you. Good for you. This is your baby. So you steer the ship as you see fit. Now, I'm going to ask this question out of ignorance because I researched you, but I didn't get this far. And now with Lead Herself, if we go to the website for Lead Herself, are there other resources beyond the app that are available on the website? Maybe mentorship or things within the website itself that are distinct from the app that people have as resource uh, access.
So I don't know when you checked my website, but I've
Okay.
just launched a new website with a lot more accurate information on it.
Okay.
It just got outdated. I realized being an entrepreneur, everything changes like every 2 weeks, and my website had gotten so out of date. But the app is the main thing for LeadHerself. I do also host events. Right now, that's only happening in London.
Okay.
So that's more of a local thing. Yeah. So that you'll see that on the website, I've got an events page, and sometimes I do virtual things. But it's mostly in person in London here. I do. I mean, the website it's mainly just here's everything you need to know about us. Put all the media features on there. There's a bunch of articles and interviews, and I do have a blog as well. So I do have blog articles going out because some of these topics are a little bit too complex, as we're talking about, to boil down into little tiny bits of app information that somebody can digest when they're,
Yeah.
I want to say, on the tube in the way to work. So I'm gotten very British apparently. But
Ah.
when you're on your commute on the way to work, I want this to be quick and clear. So yeah, there is a blog when you want to go a little bit further into
Mm.
some of these topics. So that's on there as well. Yeah, so
Okay.
that's what you'll be finding on the website. There was a period of when I was doing coaching, but taking that off. I'm not doing coaching at the moment, only on a
Oh, okay.
volunteer basis. I work with a wonderful charity here in the UK called SmartWorks that helps underprivileged women gain employment. So I do
Yeah.
coaching for them. I don't do coaching for LeadHerself.
Okay. And thank you for bringing that up because that was on my pick list of things I was going to mention because it struck me that there was a good amount of overlap between that and Lead Herself. So thank you for bringing that up. Um, do you see a community forming around this app, and how would you handle that? So in other words, because it's like things coalesce. You create something, and if it's a positively charged and it has this this
Yeah.
capacity to bring people in, what in your and I'll borrow a term from Disney. I worked for them years ago, and it's Imagineering. So what would you Imagineer sort of facilitating that and managing that, or would you be interested? Would a community coalescing around your work? What does
So,
that do for you? Ooh, it's kind of
so
scary, right? It's like people like, hey,
it's a little, yeah. I mean, depending on how much the community wants from me. No, yes,
yeah,
I do want. I mean, that's a community is a big part of the impact, and I don't want people feeling alone through this process. So there's definitely a community growing,
hmm,
centralized here in London because I do host the events, and that
okay,
you have that kind of impact with the in-person connections and those experiences and the workshops we put on and stuff like that. But there is a bigger community that's starting to form, just as when you're doing something that's quite mission driven and focused on empowering women. I do get a lot of people reaching out to me wanting to connect, know more, follow stuff, get involved. lots of people wanting to become partners, whether they be nonprofits or universities or organizations wanting, to get involved and support, which is amazing. So yes, there is a bit of community growing. I wouldn't say I'm actively trying to put a structure on it or turn it into something more than this kind of ambiguous morph of amazing humans. But that being said, if you bring up Imagineering, and if you let me dream for a minute, the absolute ideal end goal here is creating a movement. I love this idea of women, and it doesn't have to just be young women. I can expand on that in a minute, but women owning their careers and doing that with this courage and this clarity of where they're headed, and within this reality that we're facing, just this, the masses of young women and those making career transitions and moving into leadership, or, being entrepreneurs or freelancers and going off on their own, or women even, returning from career breaks or carrying responsibilities, things like that, just owning their professional identity, and believing in their own competence in that sense. Because I think so much power can come from that. So it started out as, how do we get more women in leadership? How do you diversify the leadership landscape and that type of thing? How do we get more women at the top? How do we reach gender parity, true gender parity? And the answer is, often we need our leadership to represent the human population. And there's a lot of different ways to approach that, and a lot of wonderful things that are happening out there in the world. My tact was, I want to help those that are maybe lacking the confidence or don't have the skills to navigate what they're up against. So absolute dream, starting a movement.
There you go. Yeah.
Yeah.
No, and I think that has, I'll speak for myself. I think when I'm in that aspirational mode and my little thought cloud is just stewing with potential, you have to think big, and you have to think what is, that's why I have these conversations. I want them to go out into the world and help motivate folks to alter their trajectory or change their expression somehow. That's pro-social, positively veiling. All these things.
Yeah.
Good outcomes. And so that's one thing that jazzes me when I hear other people talk about it, like you're Imagineering that. So thank you for sharing that, because I think that's so much of that magic that's baked into these motivations we have. It's fuel, I think. Now I had a question just pop in with regard to the app or Lead Herself more broadly. I am imagining that there is convergence or overlap with, like yourself, an entrepreneurial woman who has a good background. They have something that they specialize in that they want to take out and convert into a small business or blossoming into something much larger. So do you feel like that there may be a time or a need for a specialized version of what you're doing for entrepreneurial women, or do you think, and non-binary persons, or do you think that that this can develop, that Lead Herself can develop into a thing that would help cover that?
So I think the way it's built at the moment, with journeys that target different areas, different things you might want to work on, and how each of the journeys, they each have 4 skills, and each of the skills have this module within them that you then focus on each of those skills at a time. But the way it's set up right now, I can add more journeys, and the journeys can focus on all sorts of different things. Okay. So I can add a journey that has to do with entrepreneurship as a woman. There's all sorts of ways it's quite a flexible, just the way it's set up.
Okay.
I do get a lot of questions like that. Would you, do one for, older women in what something they want to be doing in retirement, something like it's not
Mm-hmm.
really my area of expertise, but there's a lot of different, like, can we do one for this? Can you do one for this? And it's, I love the enthusiasm and all the ideas that I get, but I think I can add quite a bit within the structure I've got right now to be helping. And these things, you know, I mentioned this briefly, but I talk a lot about, you know, this being for young women, because that's my story. That's where it came from for me. And that's the problem that I wanted to solve for my younger self. But I've done, you know, we just launched last week, but I did several rounds of beta testing, and I had lots of early users that had access to it before it went live, and obviously collecting quite a lot of feedback during that process to make sure what I was building was actually helping people. Okay. But what I got out of that was that I shouldn't make any assumptions for who would benefit from the app, because the content in there is so, well, the way the content is presented is so customizable that, you know, regardless of, you know, say if you're working on self-confidence, regardless of how you're struggling with self-confidence or in what context, what situations you might be more or less confident, you can kind of pick and choose what helps you. So it's quite broad in terms of, you know, who benefits from that type of stuff and how you want to make it your own. So I did get, especially from moms returning to work after having a kid, being out of work for a while and wanting to think about their professional identity a bit more and kind of get in that mindset and feel ready for it. That is quite helpful in that situation. So it's build your own, because it's the skills are quite general.
Yeah. No, from what you're saying, it seems very rhizomial and generative. I use sort of the Deleuze and Guattari rhizome. You know, it's like, you know, sort of this interdependence where it, as it develops and matures, it'll have that comprehensive nature to it. So that, like you said, a person who is on, you know, vector 6 and vector A3 on that chart that we were talking about earlier, that they can find their way to that which resonates with them, or that which gives them, you know, what they need to develop themselves.
Yeah,
so,
absolutely. And I've got a long list of skills to put in it, and I get ideas from people all the time, and always open to them, because then it's nice to know what people are interested in learning more about. But yeah.
And you and I had talked about in email conversation that we would include neuro expression and the diversity and complexity in neuro expression, and that there's certainly not a small box that we can put everybody in. So, and I speak as a dyslexic and somebody who's like a hyperactive. I never got diagnosed with anything, but I know, I'm like a Jack Russell on methamphetamine or something. So anyway, but we have to consider that, you know, again, as this is rhizomially developing, if I could milk my metaphor there, that people who are dealing with things, people on the spectrum. You know, I have friends that are Asperger's rather. I don't know if that's even a term anymore, but they're on a part of the spectrum, and my interactions with them are so enriching, because I don't consider myself to be where they are, and just how I learn from them, and I learn how they perspectively interact with the world and cognitively interact with the world, and I find that so generative for myself, because it's tempering in a way, you know, that like we don't all see things the same way, you know. So I learned that in conversation, and I love it. So anyway, I'll hand that back to you, because neurodiversity, specificity is something that's we need to be aware of in terms of how we collectively produce and navigate ourselves as a culture.
Absolutely. I mean, there's so much you can talk about with neurodiversity. I think for me, and this is coming from a personal journey with it. I have ADHD. I wasn't diagnosed until last year. I feel like it's been about a year since I was diagnosed, but it's less about the diagnosis. I didn't know that I likely had ADHD until quite recently. So maybe about 2 years ago or something like that, not 3 years ago, maybe. So I'm not the only woman that wasn't, diagnosed or had absolutely no idea she had ADHD or, whatever it might be for you until, your 30s or later on. It often doesn't become apparent for women until you have kids or you kind of level up in leadership and you've got a lot of management responsibilities, and then you start seeing some cracks in what you probably have been masking for a very long time. As a young girl growing up, told to be very neat and very, tidy and stay focused and get good grades in school. And I'm not saying boys aren't told the same thing, but it's just this slight difference in what you mask, what you see as okay in the world around you, and how to show up like that. So I always had these, what I've now seen as coping mechanisms, being very, very organized with everything I was doing, and being able to keep myself on track. And I didn't realize that I had ADHD until, somebody I worked with was like, I think you've got an attention problem. You should get tested. It takes somebody close to you that is familiar with it to see it. And then I started talking to other people about it and learning a little bit more. I'm like, oh, I'm still not sure I have that. But how we diagnose these things, everybody's different. Even if you, slap a label on it with this ADHD, everybody is so different within that, typecast, that the first, or the questions when you go to the GP and get, I think I've got ADHD. Okay. Did you have trouble in school? Well, no, I got a PhD. Oh, you probably don't have it. But that's not, you're making these assumptions based on, what everything that was obvious at one point that created these criteria for the rest of the population, and what people assume, and then you make decisions off of it. So it's very different for a lot of people, and talking about, not having resources that help you. Even I started then, it's a psychoeducation process of reading up on ADHD, and I have 3 degrees in psychology and I didn't realize I had this. And it sounds like I really lack self-awareness, but it's such a, it's shocking how subtle these things can be, and not seeing it in yourself. But that's in part because the way, the whatever it is, the DSM, how this stuff is defined and categorized and formed into these labels and these so-called disorders. I think it's antiquated. It doesn't take into account context. It doesn't take into account individual differences. Some things are oversimplified. Some, normal, but I would say normal human behaviors are medicalized and then forming, a bullet point on a list of criteria. I think it's antiquated. I think it's every single human thinks in a different way. And there are some similarities that you can group onto spectrums here and there, or, some people who are more similar to others like this. But if there's anything I've learned from discovering that I had ADHD and then figuring out how that impacted me, it's the symptoms are hit or miss with, what you've got and how that shows up with the type of work that you're doing and stuff. So basically, what I would say is that everybody, for themselves kind of needs to, don't beat yourself up if you're, got something that's a little bit different and you perceive as a deficiency compared to the person next to you, or how you think they're thinking. We all kind of have to meet ourselves where we are and experiment with different ways to shape our environment and the support we need to be able to bring our full potential out. And organizations need to do the same thing. Don't wait till an employee shows up with a note from their GP that says they have ADHD to ask them what kind of support they need. We can ask them anytime from the beginning. Recognize that everybody works differently. Of course they do. We're human, and it's when you're trying to fit everybody into this one way of working, so much talent gets wasted, gets missed. And it's just, it's a waste.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
that's my rant on
No,
psychology and labels.
yeah, no, I'm with you on that. In fact, two thoughts. I interviewed Dr. Sarifa Tekin, Professor Tekin, and she's, I think it's SUNY, State University of New York now, but she used to be at UT San Antonio. But she's in the medical humanities, and so she teaches STEM people humanities, right? And getting in touch with the softer social science aspect of this so that they're not all just these sort of bots that go into medicine or whatever. And of course, I'm being dramatic there, but
Yeah.
anyway. In fact, I have a friend that he just got out of medical school a few years ago, and he said they had an empathy course at the end of the syllabus or whatever that they, and they test for empathy too, which of course a good sociopath can blow it.
No way.
Yeah, yeah.
Huh.
He was telling me about that, and he's one of my friends that's without judgment, he's on the spectrum, but he's a freaking genius too. He's a really incredible guy. So, but anyway, to get to a point, she is working to work with the DSM if there is a 6 that comes out, that she wants inclusivity in the sense of population anecdotal input. So people with schizoaffective disorders can have input with the Hightower Authority and the people who are doing the science, that there's a overlap ground there, that people can, I think it's generative. I think it's very rich that so people, again, who are, we don't want to pigeonhole people too firmly, but, people who are in a specific, if they're going to have the, authority to claim something to be something, then these people will be representative of that to the degree. And so there is that contribution that can be made. So, hats off to her for that. And also the second point that I was thinking about when you were talking about all this is that leadership in business could certainly benefit from understanding and recognizing that, say, and it's not that they diagnose, it's just that they say that, so, well, somebody in my work group and under my leadership is expressing themselves uniquely, and I want to learn more, but again, without being a faux psychologist and trying to, seems like but more that they can open up a space for that employee and say, how do we work with you? How, and this is implicit, but how do we work with you? So that just was, that little thing came up for me when you were talking about that. But yeah, I totally agree that, we can't have simplistic genre of human expression and human perception and all, and cognitive machinations or whatever it is, cognitive operations, I guess is a better word. So yeah, here's to that awareness, because it only serves to improve the functionality, of the systems, or the business operation or whatever it is. So it strikes me that be beneficial for everyone. But yeah, for how many years, how long have these, and I'm a case study, and that's why I became self-employed. Well, I've always had side hustles, but like in 99, 2000, I just broke out on my own and just did my own businesses. And, and that's the time when I worked for Disney, and I was a chef with them, and very, very corporate structure. And, in order to keep growing, I'd have to move to, Orlando, which I hate. I don't, sorry to anybody in Orlando, but I just don't want to be there. I'd rather be in Miami where it's spicy and exciting, but Orlando's kind of like traffic jam. That's about it. So anyway, tangent. Sorry. But yeah, it's like I just went out on my own, and I said, well, I'll be my own, generator of whatever it is I end up doing. And that way I can make my mistakes and be me and be sloppy. And a lot of credit goes to my partner, my spouse, because she was on board for all of that too. So I certainly am not a self-made person. I'm a co-created person. Blah blah blah. Sorry.
Yeah, you do need the support system. That's my headphones are gone here. Hold on one second.
No problem. I'm gonna hit pause for a second.
All right, can you hear me?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay, I've done a swap there. My pods died. This must have gone on more than I thought it would. This is amazing. We're actually
1 hour right now. Yeah,
that's probably what did them in. They're starting to kind of conk out, which is, sometimes when I'm in meetings, I'm like, oh, my pods have gone. We've probably reached the end of this. They're my signal. I'm not saying that to you. It's just like, okay, that's
from the
fine.
outside.
That happens. Yeah, you need that support though, don't you? That's when you need, whether it's your partner, your family, friends around you, whatever it is that you're trying to achieve. And I think for me, it's been, I have found out that a lot of, just because I'm, more immersed in it now and talking to more people about having ADHD, I have found that a lot of, there's this correlation between having ADHD and being an entrepreneur. So there's something in there about these, the way you're thinking and what comes out of that and wanting to create and build something on your own. But then there's this flip side of that conversation that's like, okay, how do you manage your time? How do you focus?
Yeah, right. Nobody's there for you.
Yeah, that's been a learning process for sure. So that ongoing, absolutely.
Yeah. But it only makes sense because it's, helming your own ship, if you will, is, to me, it afforded me more space. Sorry, I was just choking on some coffee, so my voice is going to be off for a second. But yeah, I think
take a minute if you.
I'll muscle my way through it, by golly. But and so this probably speaks to my hyperactivity too. We owned like 3 businesses at one time. We had a restaurant, a newsstand, and then in the beginning of the restaurant, I still had one of my landscape businesses that I was sort of titrating out of because the restaurant is like 24/7. You never get away from that. But we got the newsstand because my wife was getting burned out in the restaurant, and I said, there was one around the corner and we bought it for a reasonable price. I said, just go over there and I'll do the restaurant if you help me with the books on the restaurant. And then you just have more of a Zen-like space because the restaurant is very chaotic. So we hired a really strong front of the house person who could manage the front while I did the kitchen stuff. And it worked. And then we ended up selling it a couple years later. So we didn't do it for too long, but yeah, so that's probably another symptom of
amazing
egregious hyperactivity. Yeah.
Absolutely.
In a sense of self torture. Yeah. We were young. Yeah, we were in our early 30s back then, mid 30s. So I couldn't do that now. Oh no, I'm on the glide path down now. So but inside, I'm still like I'm as wired up as I was at any time in my life. It's amazing, and I like that. It's a superpower when you can maybe be aware of it, but also know what your limitations are, like what are the downsides to it, and how can you tap into because again, like you said earlier, high achieving. Like I cram so much into a short span of time. Sometimes it's not quality. Sometimes I have to step back and fix my mistakes. But I think that speaks to neurodiversity. Like if you understand what the challenges are, and as Disney used to say, the areas of opportunity, which was to say you were making mistakes and stuff like that, so that they were so euphemistic, but anyway, that if you can harness that, I think, and my wife is a deep empath, and I'm always telling her, I'm like, that's a superpower, because sometimes she'll just start, getting really emotive about something, and I'm like, well, you have to learn to control this superpower, because there's intellectual empathy, but there's also, the affective empathy, and where are you? What are you, how are you channeling that? How are you reciprocating it with your environment or with the people in your environment? And so I try to coach her on that and say, look, you can really harness, because sometimes she just like gets frustrated, and it's like, so all of these things, all of these neurodiverse categories that we can occupy, and sometimes there's multiple categories that if it's possible, you can really turn that to your advantage, I think.
Yeah. Well, no, yeah. I mean, what you're saying is that it speaks to me more broadly, because it's not, I mean, the neurodiversity, it helps you see, and especially if, you're talking about labels or what you might have or what your, friends are saying, that you can think of, certain traits of, certain thinking patterns and habits that you might have, and certain things that you're better or worse at. But more broadly, whoever you are, whatever set of skills and experiences and personality traits, and including thinking styles within that, it starts with that self-awareness and really seeing what's there for you. I've gotten a lot more effective now that I've been learning more about ADHD and realize that I have it and see it coming up here and there. But it has to start with that self-awareness, and instead of you kind of,
bumbling on through your life and not really changing anything, and making assumptions about how you should be showing up or how you should be doing things, and beating yourself up for it when you don't have it. So it starts with a self-awareness and learning how to work with that, experimenting with different practices, different habits you can put in, different structure or support that you might need, different resources that might be out there for you, and, playing with it a bit to see what happens for you. And it's probably going to evolve over time, but that combined with an awareness of the situation and the context that you're in and what you're up against, what you need to achieve, within the bounds of reality and your job and, your life and the context there, that, that's when you can, I don't want to say effective. You don't want to make yourself as effective as can be, but just kind of bring out your potential, and it flips over into well-being and your mental health and your balance and making sure you're achieving what you want to, which, if I can tie it back into the app, that's what we're working on. It's each module starts with self-assessment and information about context, but it's more about, here are these practices. Do you want to try that? Here's, based on how you answer questions, here's this resource. Do you want to check that out? But it's the awareness from self to situation, and then the experimentation in between, the reflection in between, that helps you, grow and learn and deal with whatever cards you're dealt with.
Yeah. And that is so valuable because, my researching you has corresponded or has been in the same lane with my finding Byung-Chul Han and his work, and his big tagline is Burnout Society, and it's a critique of neoliberalism and what has become of the individual in the market system as expressed by neoliberal ideals. And it is that we are constantly optimizing or being pressured to optimize, pressured to be the excuse me, the performance enhanced self. It is and it's for the sake of your productivity. It is for the sake of being that worker, that asset. And so in recognizing that, in balance and in conjunction with other aspects of your life, I don't have a big problem with it, but I think to bifurcate for a moment that there is the you, and this is to sort of tie into what you were just saying, that your well-being as an agent in this world, as a living person in this world, with all of your suite of emotions and feelings and perhaps your neurodiverse expression, is that learn that discipline of being able to parse those out for a moment and say, what am I optimizing for? Am I optimizing for my success in a world that is market driven? Fine, that's good, but also don't neglect this aspect of yourself, which I think I may be overstating this, because there are people who are getting into mindfulness practice. They are getting into, communing with nature again and returning to a simpler self, or a simpler cultural expression or whatever. So, I just thought it might be worth, maybe zooming that out a little bit and just saying when we are optimizing, that it's not just for the sake of your career, but that it's also you're bringing this part of you along with that, and maybe there's a marriage there that the two aspects of that self can be not optimized, but at the expression that you would be in harmony with what you might be or who you might be, which is a whole thing in itself, right? But that discovery might come from that nurturing and that muscular development, that virtual muscular development of that, again, other than just chasing the dream of you being the perfect employee, the high earner, all these achievement things that you want to do, that you bring this with you, this part of yourself that is the you that will be there after you're done working, and not chasing after that career that's important. It shouldn't be dismissed. But anyway.
I've been thinking about it a lot lately as well, because it's something from industrialization, when, you know, we start with thinking about factory workers and productivity and how many units you can create in so many hours, and that fueled this culture around managing your time as though you have control over something that doesn't stop ticking. And there's thinking about we're basically talking about making work more human. And it's this idea that, I mean, for most of human existence, up in, what is it, like 99%, we worked in harmony with nature. We worked in harmony with seasons. We had different seasons to our year, in, you know, when we were working outside and when we were harvesting and when we were resting and hibernating, and this kind of flow with nature that I'm seeing some people try to bring out now more in a well-being focus in today's working world, which is, you know, more power to them. I hope it happens, but it brings this reflection on, you know, I burn out more easily at certain times of year. Should I, you know, when I do have autonomy, can I structure projects around when I know that I'll have more energy? And that, you know, can boil down into just figuring out during times of the day when you focus better and when you don't. And back to neurodiversity, having ADHD, you can probably get into some form of super focus at a certain time of the day better than other times. Can you, you know, shape your work tasks around that? And I'm not saying everybody should just quit their jobs and go work in fields somewhere. Over that would sounds quite relaxing, but, you know, taking these concepts and understanding that you're a human in a world that's expecting you to work like a machine, and how can you shape your career around that with that in mind, so you can take better care of yourself. You probably still have to do what you need to do. Everybody needs to take home a paycheck, but you know, there's sometimes little shifts that you can change, even if it's just in the way that you talk to yourself, the way you know, think about yourself and take care of yourself, that I think is quite important.
If I could imagine near a future, because I am for the preservation of the market system, right? That we need capital, we need, that could be argued. I mean, we could get into this whole thing, but given the kinetic energy of the system that's in place right now, I think it's highly unlikely that, short of a, you know, catastrophic collapse, that any kind of course correction or any kind of weird radical thing is going to happen anytime soon. But in my imagineering and my aspiration for not me or my generation, I'm old, you know, but like people in their 20s who are emerging, is exactly what you're talking about. Having a business models and market system direction that speaks more to the health of the system rather than forever growth and forever returns and forever, you know, innovation is good, and that can be, you know, part of that, but we can temper so innovation for the sake of the health of the system versus what's the next frontier, what's the next, you know, emergent thing that we can exploit, and which again, to cast a little judgment, is a kind of a masculine, you know, conquering kind of concept. It's like, you know, we need to, you know, sally forth and all that kind of stuff. So wouldn't it be nice to, and maybe this, and I don't want to speak where I may not know, but, you know, like more of a softer approach is to say the health of the organization, even if that involves less involvement with a market trading system like our United States stock market or anything like that, and that things, there's less pressure on the system. So employee-owned businesses is a great example of that. And there's people like Richard Wolff that are always championing that model, and Chomsky and his anarcho-syndicalism, which is a bit dated. But, you know, these ideas that you can have a flourishing business and you still have a C-suite that gets rewarded for their work and their acumen, but that it's more self-sustaining and looking after the health of the system itself. And if other organizations, you know, so we have to take the predatory nature out of it, blah, 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 blah. But if I could just have this wonderful thought, that's what I would aspire for future generations, is that business models are run that way versus like, oh my God, we got to meet the street. We got to meet the market. We're a high cap system, and we got to have our P&E and all these things that they worry about. And it's like, wouldn't it be nice just to be a little under less pressure? And people wouldn't need IRAs and mutual funds based on the market system, on the stock trading system, if that corporation or whatever was, you know, providing that internally, so that you're getting a decent wage and you're getting a decent, you know, piece of the, whatever the future of the company, et cetera, et cetera. So anyway, little dreams and aspirations, but But I think that would speak to what we're kind of approaching here, is that, a balance of life, a meaningful life, both in work and in the non-work environment. So I can dream, I guess.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very nice picture to be painted that I do hope. But I think, for today, there are positive changes being made. I do think it comes down to, and although it wouldn't be changing, thinking about within organizations, how the culture can be more human, how leadership can be more human, especially as AI is ever more prevalent. Thinking about meaningful work.
Yeah.
Well, I like to focus on that.
I know. And, I hate to say this, but I am cynical. Part of me is cynical, and I do appreciate the cynicism around AI from a certain perspective. So it is immersion into the commons, the cultural, psychocultural domain. For me, I love to see AI in engineering and chemistry and, biotech, whatever it is, that's helping do these calculations and these intuitive inference things that they do really well. But when they're turning them loose as apps and bots and things and chats and this and their GPTs and things like that are supposed to be part of our social commons and our normative structures of how we comport ourselves, I am flat against that. And I see a cynicism and a pushback to that. There's a lot of, at least what I'm gathering, and I could be selective, my selection bias or whatever, but I just think that humanity's, the common person's pushback on that is healthy, because we're having a hard time managing non-parasocial, non-GPT orient or whatever it is that we're doing in that interface. And so let AI and let machine learning and the LLMs have their place. They have an excellent place. And as I think you were alluding to, like, not taking our jobs, just yet, and until we figure other things out. So anyway, I'm cautiously optimistic that this whole thing about the emergence of AI and all this other stuff, that it will be tempered by our strong intuition that it shouldn't, so I say this in other conversations, gods and lovers, like we don't need gods and lovers right now. We need those things to be our mechanical slaves, like the next generation of things that, like you said, in the industrial period, we had these big lumbering machines that made things efficient, that helped the worker, yada, yada, yada. So I hope that that's another thing that the course of things, that it's not so much about us having all this interface with AI, that could be me. That could be my generation too, my age. I don't know.
I think I mostly agree, with some caveats. I think so. I'm, with what I do and building the science of organizational psychology into a product to help people. I made a stance that any advice, any guidance that you get in the app, any of the pretty much everything in the app was written by me without anything else. So it's not generated by AI. There's no database that's pulling stuff somewhere aside from anything, just a spreadsheet that I've put together. And, all these actions that I recommend are things that I've done and tested and work. And so it's in there, and it's coming from research and other things. Most of the competitors in this space are some form of AI coaching app.
Okay.
But it is an LLM, and they're getting better. But when you're stringing words together, that's not really advice for a very human experience that somebody is having. So I drew a line there, and I do use AI in my work to make me more effective. But it's not in the recommendations in the app, and there's like a notification that pops up, I think, after onboarding or early on in the process that says there's no AI used in this. But having said that, I think AI companions can be very useful for people. And, we're having this conversation about working with your brain and meeting it where it's at. ChatGPT can be very helpful managing my ADHD and organizing what types of tasks I should be doing in my focus. It makes me think about how I think and how I interact with the world and how I should be working and how I could be working in a way that's better for me that I wouldn't normally put. It helps with that self-awareness process that we're talking about. And it helps me, get organized and manage work in a way that allows me to do what I do. So I do think there are some streams, as you say, to use it as a tool, only as a tool,
right?
Not to replace me in what I do, but to help me do it better.
Yeah. No, and I agree. I think my cynicism is cultivated by, so I follow different philosophers of mind and cog-sci people, and they throw these arguments around, and it's, again, gods and lovers is kind of my short little thumbnail thing about it. And it's like, if somebody's in a loneliness, vacuum, or, they're struggling with real human to human contact, and then they start to bind with, an LLM or something, or a GPT system, and then there arises that parasocial relationship, and the human can project so quickly, and I'm generalizing here, but we can project very quickly onto something that's giving us attention and affordances and all these things. So that's a concern of mine. And so, like you said, as a tool, as a utility, and you recognize it, it's not your new friend. It's that it is a utility. Because I would love to have a GPT that I could, instead of torturing my wife or torturing somebody else, and I could sit, but again, I would have to ground myself and know that I'm not going to bind with this thing or bond with it rather. Both.
Yeah.
And then
I understand where you're going there. Yeah. Because it does seem so human that you can lose it. Quickly and not knowing where the line is. But if you're seeing it like another piece of software on your computer that you're organizing your tasks with, or you're doing something else with, that is a piece of your work or a piece of something you need to do, then put AI in a box. Don't put any humans in boxes, but give it a label, put it in a box.
Don't give it a face. Don't give it a good voice.
Maybe don't choose, because you can choose voices on it. Give it some weird,
see, that's the thing.
Give it some weird voice.
And the other thing, the gods part is, like, they talk again in these circles of philosophy of mind about consciousness and sentience and AI rights and singularity and all this kind of stuff. And I'm like, no. To me, and again, it could just be me, but it's like, these are ones and zeros right now. These are just ones and zeros, and they're gates and valves. So I want to keep it that way. It's like we could have the simulacra. We could have that, which could be what religion is. I mean, I'm kind of cynical there too. It's like, we develop a simulacra of something that is transcendent of us, and that it is salvific or soteriological or blah 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 blah. But it's being imposed onto the possibility of what AI can do, the possibility of machine learning, and the possibility of a moment where they talk about a singularity where AI will become conscious. And it's like, we can't even define consciousness as living systems ourselves without having 800 different definitions and controversy and hard problems and all this kind of stuff. But yet we want to have that in our aspirations for the future of our relationship with the machine learning. So I right now I build a big strong wall and say, let's just see it as a mechanical system outside, extended mind outside of ourselves that we developed. But for it to have affective states, for it to have a psychosomatic response, to palpate the world as we do, we are evolutionary creatures. It took millions of years to get where all living systems are right now, and that was very natural and organic. And so we come along with something that's silicon. So to me, maybe I'm just being stodgy and this and that. But the outlet, so I'll argue against myself, is hybrid systems, where we have carbo-silico interface. And I interviewed Mike Levin, who's a developmental biologist, and he and Josh Bongard, Levin's at Tufts and Bongard's at the University of New Hampshire. They're doing these carbo-silico hybrids where they have living systems interacting, attached physically to a carbon system, or a silicon system. So there is that interface. So hybrids, I would grant that we took where evolution has taken us, and then extended into so intelligence has overlap and convergence. That's where I grant that we could have intelligent systems that we don't even know about right now. In 30 years, there could be hybridic systems, or chimeric systems that I will grant that they are our peers in terms of having rights and ethical affordances and all these things. But a hunk of silicon right now, to me, I'm not sold. It's like the Turing thing, it's like I'm not sold yet. Yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway.
No, I think I agree there with you. I just read. I'm not going to remember the author's name, but The New Science of Consciousness.
Oh, Seth? Anil Seth, was it?
Yes.
Or is that, okay.
Yes, that sounds familiar. I think that's it. But yeah, I think sticking right there with you that we're not quite there yet.
Yeah.
If we don't understand consciousness. How can we build something?
Right.
But I think we also have no idea where the future's going. So.
Right. Well, one thing that Mike Levin at Tufts is talking about is like, we have no idea what the future of intelligence is like. And so for me, my outlet as a folksy, intuitive, no education kind of person is consciousness to me is a verb. It's nothing that can be reified. It's nothing that can be granted an ontic status, like a tangible physical status. Like it's something that happens. And I look at intelligence the same way. It's a verb. We intelligence, we conscious, or however you would say it. Like, we don't even really have the language for it. It's like we're consciousing and we're intelligencing. And single-celled animalcule. I interviewed Deepa Rajan. She's a PhD MD student at UC San Francisco. She was working with little things called Stentor cerealis. They're pond critters, and they're single cells, and she habituated their behavior, one cell. And she was, for short spans of time relative to their scale, learned things. They learned reaction and aversion and affinity kind of things. And so it's demonstrating to me that, it's like intelligence. And I don't know what is it biosystems? I don't know, but that it's a verb, that it's continuous and it's on this scale invariant thing. And we're just a deeply complexified intelligencing system that's consciousing at the same time, because all of the intelligencing led up to these sense data gathering things like, the five senses we have. So that's how I get out of it. I'm just like, it's not a thing. It's just a process, So, and anyway, it's my little salve, my little pablum that keeps me from, because I love to fuss over that stuff, but it's like, so anyway, getting it back to LLMs and AI, forget about it. When we have hybrodic systems, when we have chimeric systems, then we can talk about it, because they will be integrated with what evolution and adaptation brought to the fore in this epoch or wherever we are. Then we can talk about it. But as far as just a machine, I'm cynical. It's like my desktop computer. It's doing things for me, and it's my extended mind, more or less. So, anywho, as you said earlier, that I go on tangents, but bringing it back to your work, though, that I appreciate that you are not bulking it or having, a constituency of artificial intelligence embedded, that it helps you, but that's a step in you developing a very organic system. Because I think that to me, it would develop a trust that you are a posteriori, if I keep the philosophy terms going, that a posteriori knowledge, your lived experience is in this work, versus an AI system, which is barely a priori. It's like, it doesn't know, it never experienced it. It's just regurgitating what it's garnered from databases or wherever from the internet.
Yeah, you don't know where it's getting it from, but it's getting it from a lot of different places, and it most often doesn't have the greatest advice. But yes, it is a very, very real, very genuine. Like, I hope you find typos in it, because that was me writing things out. I don't want it to be perfect. Yeah. It's authenticity is core to what I'm doing. Core to the brand, core to my experience with it. So it is a very human endeavor.
Indeed. One of my philosophers I follow said something the other day that, we are a culture with an ecology of trust. And if trust breaks down, then culture starts to deteriorate. And so that people can trust your system, knowing that it's born of you and your experience and your heart and your soul and everything that you put into it, is that cohesion, that facilitation of cohesion. I think for somebody, not doubting that the product will, or the app will, be good for them and it will provide for them. So in other words, they could go again, like you're to the field in the competition, and there's some generative thing out there that the sincerity, I think, is absent. And again, that could be my age speaking. There might be people that have better trust in those things, but I like the fact that what you do is authentic in that sense.
I appreciate that. Yeah, I hope users will see it that way and will feel that. It's I mean, most brands are competing for trust because that is the thing. That is the thing that gets people to buy in. But I think for me, especially in this age where we have information overload and we do have AI, and a lot of people are growing up using AI companions for all sorts of information access, whatever they need help with. There is a library within the app. There's a resource library within the app that is all things vetted by me. So, and again, any way you learn, books, podcasts, videos, articles, so short form things, it is all of that vetted by me in there for, anybody who wants a trusted source and wants something that, your friends read and has recommended, is that kind of feeling.
Right.
Because there's so much out there and so much of it doesn't help. So much of it doesn't make any sense. So yeah, we do need trust.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And again, the organic nature of what you're doing, the a posteriori, your lived experience is a anchor, or the undergirding of that, so architectural, it's giving you a foundation that I think will do well for you, or you will do well by it being there. So now we're at an hour and a half, and so what I think I would like to get in before we bring this one in is or bring it to a close is what haven't we covered about LeadHerself that you want to bring out, questions I haven't asked or things that just haven't come up that we can share with the audience, or anything in general. It doesn't have to be LeadHerself, just anything you want to bring out that you think would be important for this conversation.
We've covered quite a lot with it. I think, LeadHerself is, anybody can download the app and check it out and not pay any money in it to be able to see what's in there so they can explore it for themselves. I'd much rather have that. But I think it's I want to reiterate this standpoint that, it's such a subtle thing, but challenge your assumptions that you have about your workplace, your environment. A lot of people when I start talking about this unconscious bias and people not seeing you in the way that you could be seen and valued for, they say, oh, that doesn't happen in my workplace. It's all, very gender equality is part of what we're doing. Diversity is key to the principles of the organization. I'm doing great. I got a promotion and that kind of stuff. But it's so subtle and runs below the radar. And so it's the main thing is that stopping it impact how you feel about yourself, but knowing that there is stuff out there for you. There is support out there for you. And I think it's feeling that you're not alone, and it doesn't have to be this, oh, the world is, it's quite a negative thing to talk about sometimes, what we're up against, but it doesn't have to be that way. It's more of this adopting a paradox mindset that, there might be these seeming contradictions against, how we want to show up or how we would normally show up, and then how people are expecting us to show up. But I love the paradox mindset because it's embracing that there's a duality, but you don't have to slot it into a binary. You can, your warmth can be paired with strength. You don't have to be one or the other. You don't fit in this box like we're talking about. It's this mindset shift that, okay, this is the reality I'm up against, but that doesn't mean I have to, roll over and be a feminine stereotype over here or a masculine stereotype, or,
right.
You don't, it's okay, this is what I'm up against. And these are the skills that I need to, or the traits I need to portray in this situation to be effective and to achieve what I want to achieve. And that doesn't mean acting like somebody else, acting like a man. You know, this bro boost trend going around on LinkedIn where you change your name to something male sounding and you change all your language to be more masculine and all that. You know, it's a new trend on a very age old thing that, yes, there are differences perceived there, but you don't have to pretend to be somebody else. You can lean into very authentic parts of who you already are. To make it happen and to be effective and be who you need to be. So it's a complex idea, but that's the paradox mindset kind of encapsulates it. It's this, you know, there might be a contradiction, but we're all kind of contradictions in ourselves. So you can still be authentic and still make it happen for yourself.
Yeah. Amen.
If that makes any sense. I'm still working on like how to communicate that, which is why I don't jump into it at the start of a conversation, because it's a big idea and probably raises other questions. But paradox.
There's a huge philosophical rabbit hole that we could go down. And but you touched on something that's of deep value to me that again, if I had a magic wand, I would love to bring this to more prominence, and that is holding the paradox, holding again, the tonos, you know, seeing that, yes, it appears binary because there's a pole here and there's a pole here, but you're discounting the relationship that it has with its counterpart. And that is I think a skill in the West. And I'll blame the Enlightenment project in the 18th and 19th century for that. But here we are, and we can retrieve that. And maybe that's why some of, and I hate the dichotomy of even East-West thinking, but, you know, more dual, you know, thinking non-dual, and the relationship of the harmony and the tension and things like that. But it's in Western canon too. It's in but the Greeks got that from the East. But what a skill to develop. And maybe that's part of your imagineering, you know, developing that and helping not just women and non-binary, but everyone to embrace that tension. There's a gal that I interviewed. She has her a podcast that's amazing. It's called Love and Philosophy, and she speaks to that a lot. Andrea Hyatt. She's in Belgium. She's from American, but she's living in Belgium right now. And I had the pleasure of interviewing her, but her guests are super amazing. In fact, I might suggest an introduction because she that kind of, she could pull that out of you. You know, you two could really vibe on that and just have this really generative and productive conversation. So maybe after we stop this, I'll pass some information along. But yes, Goldmine, super amazing space to help people breaking the dichotomy or the false dilemma that arises from, you know, seeming dichotomies and all that kind of stuff. So that's wonderful. All right, I have one more thing. We talked about it earlier, and this is you imagining a future LeadHerself, a future you doing things. But we talked about sort of more ethically idealized things, but structural, functional, organizational. Do you see LeadHerself going into other domains or other arenas to do things, or are you like 100% cool with where you are and what you're going, or do you have these like little flickers from time to time, like, wonder if I tried something? I have no idea what to suggest, but I'm just wondering if, like, you as a creative and an entrepreneur and an obviously very brilliant person, if you have little seeds that you're holding in your hand and thinking about planting. If that's a good metaphor.
I mean, with the ADHD, I've got all sorts of seeds, and I'm just kind of spilling them all over the floor at the moment, if you will. So I think, you know, what again, the contradiction. There's part of me that's this just dreaming constantly. I've learned to put all of those things down in one file and put them to the side, because then I never get anything done. So I am trying to focus more short term. Yes, there are like ideas that I could go in a bunch of different directions with it. Nothing that I'm ready to commit to yet. Very much going with the flow. And this first phase is partnering with universities and nonprofits and different groups. And that in itself has been quite interesting, because I have these conversations with different groups that I wouldn't have, you know, immediately jumped to as the ideal user for the app, but people are reaching out to me and saying, yeah, no, this is relevant for us. So I'm kind of seeing where that goes at the moment, and just kind of So it is a very organic thing. And then partnering with organizations as well is kind of would be the phase after that. Mm-hmm. Getting into 2026 now, I need to focus one day at a time.
Of course.
At the moment and get everything done. But yeah, so it's that, and that's what I'm focusing on at the moment, and the visibility. And I've got some other speaking opportunities coming up, and probably going to go more into the research, because that's the background. So part of the dream is always to, I've got quite a complex system set up to analyze how people are using the app, personal information, GDPR compliant. Need to say that little line, make sure we have no data privacy concerns. But so what's most effective for different people? We talk about intersectionality and all these complexities. So getting into the data behind the app and how people are interacting with it, and feedback that I might be able to collect, I think could form some really helpful information that I will then try to spin out as much as I can.
Okay.
Research might be one of those streams. Yeah.
And that opens up doors and opportunities and things like that. These salience moments, or these insight moments that you'll get. You're like, oh my God, this is so great. Bracket, stay focused, but get back to that. Go
That's
with
so
the flow,
cool. But not so much that I get lost and float down the stream.
Right, they're just sort of floundering in the water or whatever. I get that. Again, as somebody super hyperactive, undiagnosed, probably ADHD, I totally appreciate that. So a technical question that just arose from working with institutions and universities: can you batch license your app to a group, or how does that even work?
So I will be exploring this. Very early days of fleshing out what a partnership model looks like. It could be something like a licensing situation. I don't know. Again, I need to keep this manageable for myself and what works as a business model. So I don't know 100% yet what it's going to look like, how it will work legally and things like that with an organization. But stay tuned.
Yes. I'm so excited for you, because I wick that up myself, and it gets my little creative juices flowing, and it's like, just to hear you speak and to hear, you are in that. It's beyond nascent. It's the emergent phase, and it's that this is I like botany, so it's like an emerging floral expression, and it is demonstrating to the world, this reciprocal thing. It's receptivity, but it's also, it's distribution, and it's like, wow, this is just so beautiful to see people being creative like this. So I appreciate it. I am going to stay tuned and make sure that I see wonderful things coming from you and from LeadHerself and whatever else may manifest in the future. So, all right. Anything else before we bring this one in for a landing? Was there anything else you wanted to conclude with, parting thought? Anything at all, or should I know like you said, we gave them a lot, so.
Yeah, and I think we could probably talk forever, but I think we've hit the highlights, and I'm always open to more conversations. If somebody has a question for me, I've got a website, so find me on socials and things like that. I think we've probably covered as much as we need to for the conversation today, but I've really enjoyed it. So I appreciate so much the support that you're showing for what I'm doing, and for the other people you have in your interview series as well. It's just amazing. And it's been lovely kind of having these tangents with you and discussing it all, and, seeing what comes out of it. It's amazing. Yeah. So thank you so much.
Of course. This is, to butcher French, this is my raison d'etre of the show, is just to platform people and to get ideas out for consumption. So thank you for being a creative partner in this, and having this conversation with me. I appreciate it. As the audience, as my subscribers know, all socials and contact websites and everything for Julianna will be in the description field or the show notes of the video, and on Spotify as well. So you'll be able to find out more or explore more that way. So again, Julianna, thank you so much for sharing everything with us today, and I wish you all the best in this new chapter, but as well as any other chapters that unfold. Thank
you so much. I really mean it when I say I've enjoyed this. I really have.
Good. Okay,
Thank you.
good. That warms my heart. I'll say goodbye to you after we stop record, but to the YouTube audience and the Spotify audience, thank you all so much for your attention and your presence in this conversation. Appreciate it very much. And I'll see you guys in the next conversation.